Actually, I am. I was surprised at how much time I was taking number one away from cases. And I'm walking around with cases. Especially last portion of this year, I was last portion of this year, I was just feeling getting on. And I'm trying to keep up with Joel. Yeah, and that's pretty I was in there, in fact, I told the story. I just got to do what we're doing emotional the police and federal employees and $15,000 it was late in the evening and I was good on emotional stress. And here she was saying so I ended my argument. The next day I came to people and said, "This was the assistant target." See, that was just good. They were Maybe that's
Hi everyone, thank you for coming. We're waiting on our third panelist right now, but they don't actually get started till after we present the results of our small survey. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask everyone to go ahead and grab some breakfast. Now we'll start in a few minutes. Go ahead and grab some breakfast and some coffee, and then we'll wait for that third panelist. We'll probably get started in just a few minutes, about 10 after. So thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you, Justice Burton. We'll get started soon. Sullivan, my right after that, so we'll be just right here.
Speeches are written on Be followed by blue letters.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming to this event. I think this event is very timely right now with many judicial openings coming up. We have seen in various districts a number of them that have 10 spots applying that are men and one woman. The most recent Ada County magistrate, or actually, I think it's the magistrate spot, had 60% men and 40% women. We were very, very happy to see that. We'd like to get those numbers up for the women applying. So the question is, what does it take to get women on the bench? What does it take to get women to apply? So that's what we're going to be exploring today. This event is put on in conjunction, well, it's an Idaho Women Lawyers event that's put on by our Lunch and Learn Committee, or in this case, Breakfast and Learn, and our Judicial Recruitment Committee. So these two entities decided back in, I think it was 2010, there was a larger bar-wide survey done regarding why people do or do not apply for judicial positions, what the concerns were. Many of you may have seen Judge Lansing and Judge Gutierrez make those presentations regarding the results of that survey. 2015, we kind of thought maybe we should see if there was some changes. There were some changes. So we did a much smaller scale, much less broad survey, but it was still very telling, and that's what I'm going to present to you before we get to our panel discussion. So one of the questions we asked was, how long have you been practicing law? Because obviously we have minimum requirements for our judges, 5 years practicing to become a magistrate, 10 years practicing to become a district judge. So it was very important to us to know what percentage of the responses were in each category. We had 23% less than 5 years, more than 5 but less than 10. So those that have the minimum requirements for a magistrate judge position is 20%. More than 10 years but less than 20 years, 35%, and then 20 years or more, 22%. And you can see the breakdown of how many responses made up those percentages. Have you ever applied for a judicial position? 18% of the people we surveyed said yes, and 82% said no. Which wouldn't be surprising depending on whether or not they were actually met the minimum, whether they actually met the minimum qualifications. So we broke it down by that. 5 to 10 years. So these are the women that could have applied, met the minimum qualifications to be a magistrate judge. Everybody from there on. 19, no, 2 yes, 10 to 20 years, and you can see that the number of yeses do increase the longer a woman has been practicing based on this survey. Okay. Okay. Do you intend to, or have you ever considered applying for a judicial position? 51% of the responses said yes. So then we asked, why are you interested in becoming a judge? The main reasons were public service, the role of a judge as decision maker and problem solver, and career goal. What concerns do you have for becoming a judge? The most concerning to the women that took the survey were the judicial selection process, the potential elections, and whether or not they had appropriate experience. The least concerning were negative perception, judicial canons, and transition. Then we broke that down by concerns by years of experience, because it would make sense if people didn't think they had the appropriate qualifications if they didn't meet the minimum requirements, right? What we found was that the concerns about appropriate experience were still prevalent even when women met the minimum qualifications for a magistrate and the district judge positions. We found that in our 20 years or more category, the appropriate experience finally fell off, so about 20 years. And you can see the breakdown here. Judicial selection process remains the #1 concern for women that are thinking about applying to be a judge. We ask that they identify the reasons for not applying yet, not applying again, or not applying at all. Do not possess the appropriate experience is 50%. Remember, there were 50% that wanted to, 50% that do not feel that they are qualified. Judicial selection process was 40%, and potential elections / career goal, which is another one. We also broke this out by the years of experience, and you can see it's very similar to the previous slides. Appropriate experience remains a serious concern up into the 20-year mark. Judicial selection process is always the number one. Why are you not interested in becoming a judge? Kind of the same questions, asked slightly different ways to ensure the accuracy of the results and to see if any differences and nuances might arise. Judicial selection process, still number one. Appropriate experience was the second, and potential elections / career goals. So some people, it's just not a career goal for them. Please indicate whether you perceive bias in any of the following areas, whether you perceive that bias is a factor in the judicial selection. 81% of the people we surveyed felt that sex was a bias in the judicial selection process. So when we're asking ourselves, why are people concerned? Why are these the people that we surveyed concerned about the judicial selection process, the main impediment to applying to become a judge? Most of them said they perceive bias, they perceive gender bias. The second bias that they perceived was political affiliation, and the third was small p politics. And if anybody has any questions regarding this data, this is what we compiled to kind of in a presentation format. If you have any questions, would like anything fleshed out, please just don't hesitate to raise your hand and ask us.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you're talking about judicial positions, are you including administrative judicial positions or just trial judicial positions?
We were just contemplating the state bench and the federal bench.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Comments from the survey. We asked if there were any difference with federal appointments. And many responses believed politics or political affiliation played a larger role in federal appointments. When we asked questions of state versus federal, the number of responses that discussed the politicalness of the process went up significantly. General comment summary. Many responses focused on the application process, the interview, and the electronic bar survey. We got many comments about the bar survey. There are there are very strong feelings on the bar survey and its potential negative effects. So what does the survey tell us? What doesn't seem to be concerning to our members, these were items of the members, I think I mentioned, that we polled. The transition to the bench is not a concern for them. Judicial canons aren't a concern for them. Isolation of the judiciary is not a concern. Heavy workloads, inadequate compensation, negative perception of the judiciary, none of those are concerns. So actually doing the job is not a concern for our members. But what they are concerned about is the judicial selection process, potential elections, belief of not possessing the appropriate experience. For some, it's just not a career goal. And then perceived bias in sex, political affiliation, and politics. So what we see is that the women we surveyed weren't worried about doing the job. They were worried about getting into the job. And that's the struggle that we have to overcome. This presentation, all the wonderful graphs, was brought to you by Jenny Swinford. She actually played a huge hand in getting all of this data collected and put together in a format that we presented. She couldn't be here today, but I definitely wanted to give her the kudos for getting all of this in such an amazing format, and I hope I did it justice for her. So those are the survey results, and now I'm going to have Peg Dougherty, who needs no introduction among this group. And Peg will be moderating our panel, who will now discuss the concern, which is how do we get women on the bench?
That was it. That was my halo. we're missing one panelist. I think she's on her way, just Judge
We don't need
Sullivan.
women,
But
so-
we have the guys here to tell us how it works. But I will say, Judge Hippler, who is a 4th District judge, is also a member of Idaho Women Lawyers, has been a strong supporter of our organization, and utilized some of the information that we had gleaned through the process of attending interviews and working with the Judicial Council when he applied for the 4th District bench. So I think he'll be able to shed some light on the value of that and his experience in the application process. And speaking of people who need no introduction, Justice Burdick, who is the former Chief Justice of the Idaho Supreme Court, also served on the Judicial Council. So I think his insight is going to be extremely welcome to anyone who's contemplating applying for the bench. I wanted to give you some statistics just to start out with so that we can gain some context here today. Right now, the active bar is about a 26-74% split between women and men. Our judiciary today runs at about 17%. That's really, it's much lower than we want to see. However, we have seen great gains since 2010 that we should be quite proud of. I think it was in 2008 to 2010, we ran about 8%. And then in 2010, we hit 11%. And like I said, today we're right about 17%. Like Brenda said, the number of women that are in Idaho Lawyers is about 266. So the survey went out to 266 members who received about 103 responses. So pretty good statistically speaking, but a fairly small number when we're talking about the active bar. So I think perspective is everything. We should keep that in mind. But with that, I'd like to just start with our panel members and have them enlighten us with their experience and wisdom. So to start out with, will you just tell us about your path to the bench, including how many years you practiced before applying, and given the statistics that we saw in our survey that many women believe that they're not quite ready to apply, despite hitting that minimum requirement. So if you will speak a little bit about that and your experience.
So I was probably a little longer than average on application. Perhaps I had graduated in '91 from law school and practice. I was appointed in 2013, so I practiced 22 years really. And it was not something that I had thought about doing for a long time and then put off. It was, you know, I had, as a young trial lawyer, I thought that the job of the trial judges that I was in front of in the district court looked like that pretty cool job, I thought. And then as practice got busy and as I gained more and more responsibility, it's not really something that I thought much about again. And as I was getting sort of in that 20-year mark, you know, I kind of did an assessment of where I was at and was I happy doing what I was doing. And the idea, I think, was that I was happy doing what I was doing, but I didn't find it challenging anymore to the extent that it had been before. It was a lot of, I had, you know, I thought, learned how to try a case pretty well and how to manage a case. And so now I was kind of doing the same thing with just a different set of facts and a different set of players. And so I had a discussion with my wife about, you know, where we thought, was she happy with what she was doing? Was I happy? And I looked at what could I do that might be challenging and fun. And I thought, you know, I remembered those thoughts from when I was a younger lawyer that being a district judge might be really interesting and challenging. I talked to a few people that I knew that had been district judges and confirmed some of the pluses and minuses. And so I decided, I'll throw it in and sort of a fatalist attitude. If what happens will happen. I'll throw it in once, and if I don't make the short list, then I think that's a pretty good indication, and I won't do it again. I was lucky enough to make the short list, and then lucky enough to be appointed that one time that I applied, and so that was sort of my career path. But, you know, had I not decided to throw in, I would still be doing what I was doing, I think. And so I guess I would encourage folks, you know, Wayne Gretzky, famous North American hockey player, said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, which is true. So you don't know if you had a chance to make it unless you make it. You don't have to necessarily be the most qualified person to want to be a judge. You have to be one of the more qualified that apply that particular time. And then for whatever, and I still haven't figured out what drives the governor's choices, be at the forefront of his mind. If you get an opportunity to interview with him, impress him in the interview, or perhaps have other people say good things about you, I'm sure what that process, what drives that process. So that's my story, I guess.
Judge Sullivan had this, unfortunately, she had to come from, not unfortunately, but she had to come all the way from Tampa, and it is her kid's 6th birthday, so she was having trouble getting out of the house this morning. I can all relate to and understand. So Judge Sullivan is currently a magistrate in the 3rd Judicial District and has applied for the open district judge position and is on the short list, has been on the short list prior to this time, so she brings insight not only from applying and being appointed as a magistrate, but going through the application process and meeting with the governor in the very recent past. So I think she's going to be able to bring some very valuable information as well. So Judge Sullivan, we were just talking about each of your paths to the bench. If you would tell us about your path and how many years you practiced before making a decision to throw your hat in the ring.
I took the bar.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. This air conditioner over here is a little bit loud, so if you'll speak up so the people on that side of the room can hear, that would be great.
Sure, and I'll do my best. I have to apologize. You know, it's my kids' birthday, so of course I give them presents. They gave me a gold as well. You know, I woke up this morning like, happy birthday. Great. So anyway, so I apologize. I took the bar in 2000. I moved up here to Idaho from New Mexico. I worked at an immigration office for a year, and then I hit my groove doing criminal defense, and then still working with immigration on the side. I worked at the Canyon County Public Defender's Office until I was going to 2006. So I had the gamut of cases there, and obviously was in court every day. I was involved with all the courthouse personnel, with the personalities, and I just loved it. I couldn't get enough of being in court, especially in contrast with a lot of the immigration work I was doing. A lot of it was adjustment status. A lot of people work, a lot of people that you could meet, but not the groove that, if you, for lack of a better word, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll being in court every day. You know, you kind of get a bit of it and try to rush doing that, and I really liked that. So then I went into private practice, still focusing on immigration and criminal defense, and then family law with Adam Hoffman for 5 years. And then I remember showing up for court one day to do an hidden bond action or something. And it was the last case, and as Judge Tasey was leaving the bench, he said, Judge Sullivan, May 29th. What was May 29th? So that's my last day. Get your application ready. So that was so you know, so the little seed is planted, and then you start thinking about it, and it's like, oh gosh, you know, I think I was 35 at the time he told me that, and 36 when I actually took the bench. And so I'm like, who's gonna? I mean, even today, I'm still like, go meet people hot. No, really, I know, right? They actually, I got through. I'm a judge. Can you believe it? And so there's still that, but it was a good seed to plant, and to have the venture to to kind of mull over and to think about. And it really was something that I always thought about doing and thought that I would do well and that I would enjoy and that I felt that I could really contribute doing so. And being able to take, just being a coordinator every day, either on the family side or on the criminal side. I mean, you get used to, I don't know, the box, right? Like, you know what the problem, all right, there's going to be 2 kids that are going to enjoy legal, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, is there a suppression motion? I mean, you get to know that, the routine, if you will. And so it's really interesting to be to think about looking at it from a different perspective, right? So now, as a judge, you know the game, right? You know who's going to play what card at what time, but getting to be in a different role and watch that all play out is really fascinating. There's a learning curve for sure, but it's just fun. I just love it. So yeah.
Great, Justice Burdick. Tell us about your history.
That
might be too short, right?
First of all, I was much like you. A judge came up to me and said, Judge Schott's leaving. Would you like to put in? I said, no, I'm not smart enough. I prove that every day now. But then one person put in, and somebody didn't like him in the higher up, and as a result, they reopened, and they talked to me some more, and I put in, and I was very surprised when I got it. But having said that, my background was private practice, prosecutor in Ada County, prosecutor in Jerome County, public defender in the interim time in 4 different counties in the Magic Valley. And then I got on the judicial track at about 35, I think. And 7 years of practicing law. Unlike Steve, who graduated in 91, I think he graduated in 74. Most of you weren't alive then, for Christ's sake. It's amazing. But having done that, it is just my nature to continue to move up whatever ladder I'm in, and I then became a district judge, and then the water judge, and then the administrative judge. And the politics, I was appointed a district judge by Andrus. I was appointed to the Supreme Court by Kim Thorne, and I never knew either of them. The first time I met Governor Andrus, I met him in 2010 when I was running for this position against John Bradbury. I didn't know anybody on Kim Thorne's staff. I had met Dirk once at some function. I think it was the Judicial conference. He came and talked to us. I said, hi, my name's Roger Burdick. I am Dirk. And that was it. So I don't know what politics are involved. I don't know. Now, I've been involved, luckily enough. I was the first magistrate on the Judicial Council. I was district judge representative on the Judicial Council for 6 years. As administrative judge, we had a large turnover of magistrates in the 5th District when I was administrative judge. And as such, you're in charge of the Magistrate Commission appointing magistrates. And then my latest stint on the Judicial Council of 4 years. I've been involved in the interviewing of well over 40 successful applicants for judicial positions. And I can tell you, every time I've been involved, it had nothing to do with anything more than the best and the brightest. Twice during Judicial Council proceedings, someone has said, we need, one time it was in Moscow, clear back in whenever, we need to put a woman's name forward to the governor. It was obvious the woman was not qualified. And Alice Hennessy, who was the ex-vice president of Boise Cascade, jumped the person who had said that immediately and said, that's not our job. And as a result, that woman's name did not get forwarded to the governor. The second time, it was a very active Democrat who we sent to the governor twice. And the second time, one of the council members said, why are we doing this? This man's a Democrat, he has no chance. And Phil Rehberger jumped him before he almost finished the sentence and said, that's not our job. We pass on the best and the brightest. So there's a lot of folklore out there about the Judicial Council, and it's just that. It's folklore. After it gets to the governor, that's the beauty of what we have here in Idaho. The best system possible. It is a melding, at least in the district court, it is a melding of best and brightest and politics. I don't know what went on before I got on the Judicial Council in 1970, probably 1984, 1983. But ever since then, and in every other panel that I've ever discussed, whether it was me or Eisman who was chair, it was always the best and the brightest. So I think you can get folklore out of the issue of the Judicial Council. I think we have a great system because we meld politics and merit. I think most judges try to retire so that the council can work on merit, and then we throw it open to politics. And the people of Idaho want politics involved in this election. You asked, one of the written questions is, what do you think about elections? I don't like elections. I think it's wrong to elect judges. Having said that, I was deeply touched after the 2010 election, having gone out and gone statewide and run 13,000 miles on my Subaru in 2 months, 2.5 months. And I was deeply touched and was really touched by the people I met and how important the job is. It really refreshed me. And they want elections, and I think that is some of why we have a great system here. We don't let it get away from us like it has in the past, or like it does in Texas or Ohio, etc. But we have a great combination. And I can tell you, when I ran the Magistrate Commission, and I know when Barry Wood ran the Magistrate Commission in the 5th District, it was best and brightest. We didn't give a rat's ass who you knew or what anything else. It was your experience, and that's not what. Steve, unfortunately, just slipped through.
Said it's about just fine, you never know.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we could dovetail off of Justice Burdick's comments about the election. I know that the survey responses indicate that that is at least an issue that gives people pause, if not acts as a deterrent to applying for a judicial seat. So maybe we could get your perspective. Justice Burdick, I believe, is the only one who's been in a contested election of these 3 panelists. Former Justice Silak is with us today, and she certainly has had that experience twice. Okay, so we would love to get your thoughts on this issue as well. But let's start, Judge Hippler. Sure. What are your thoughts about the prospect of a contested election, and how did that play into your decision, if at all?
I guess I should first ask Justice Burdick, as a former member of the Judicial Council, am I allowed to talk about my view of judicial elections? So that's one of the things when you become a judge, your First Amendment rights kind of go away. So you need to be careful.
If you can't get around the canons, you shouldn't be a district judge.
So my view on judicial elections, I think they're a terrible idea. You go back and you read the Federalist Papers, 78, 79, 80, and they talk clearly, I think, what clearly is can be written in the language of the day, about the importance of an independent judiciary that is not beholden to the executive or to the purse strings of the legislative, or even necessarily to the people and the popular whims of the people. And that's the way the federal system is set up with a lifetime appointment. constitutional provisions that prohibit the legislative branch from diminishing the salary of judges, of federal judges, for a reason, because you don't want to insert politics into the judicial decision-making process. And so for that reason, I think it's a terrible idea. I think it's practically a difficult idea because, as I started out saying by asking Justice Burdick, we are very limited on what we can talk about. And so it's very difficult to go and talk to folks about issues of the day because we are limited about what we can talk about. We can certainly not talk about issues that are likely to come before us as judges. And so it seems to me, from my sort of backbench view of what has happened with elections, they are in many respects, particularly not necessarily at the Supreme Court level. I think that there's more involvement, press coverage about those elections, but at the district judge level, it seems to be almost like a high school class president election in terms of name recognition. Who can spend the most on yard signs and get their name out there so that when somebody goes to the ballot, that name sounds familiar to me. I think that's really kind of what it comes down to, and I'm not sure that's the best way to select and retain judges. That said, it is what we have, and it doesn't sound like it's going away anytime soon. So those of you that are interested in the judicial position need to be aware of that and just be prepared for it. Understand that unless you are independent wealth, that perhaps you have a savings account that is either a children's education fund or alternatively a campaign fund, depending on what happens. And that's just sort of the nature of the job. And you can't be intimidated by it. And if you do get somebody that runs against you, decides to run against you, we've seen more and more of that recently. Nobody has been successful in this last go around challenging a sitting district judge. But you just need to prepare to put in the hard work of going out and meeting people, and unfortunately, the task is spending some money.
Judge Sullivan, do you have any thoughts on how that factored into your decision?
Well, right now, I'm a magistrate, so we just have retention elections. Woo! That's something to, well, I shouldn't even say that, because even with the retention election, I was still up that night figuring out what the results were. I mean, you're not blaming. There are the exceptions where someone is actually unelected, but it's not the same risk or exposure as a district court or as a Supreme Court position, obviously. I've thought about this issue. I applied for the Court of Appeals, which obviously is a contested election, district court contested election. And it's something that you talk to your family about, and you're right, you got your kids' college fund, and or if you need to run, you got the funds to do that. But it is it's something that you have to come to terms with if you are looking for one of those positions. I agree, it is what it is. It's not bad or good, but it is the process and the parameters that you have to be mindful of. As a judge, you hold yourself to a high standard, and so it makes sense that the people of Idaho should hold you to the same standard as well. It is a daunting task, and there's several district court judges that chew through their fingernails, to say the least, as they're waiting for the deadline to apply to follow.
And one thing on that, I think it's really important that if you do get the position, that you not let it consume you or worry about it. The best piece of advice I got when I was taking the bench was from Judge Wilbur, who was leaving around the time. I didn't place him, he was retiring around the time that I came on. And he said, Steve said, one of these days you're going to have this issue before you where you know that if you decided the way that you think it should be decided, it will cost you your job. And you just need to decide it that way, and that's what true courage is. And I agree with him. And that's just, it comes with the territory.
Dean Stanek, would you like to add your thoughts to this conversation?
Yeah, I am, as probably all of you know, a great proponent of having diversity on the bench. Men and women, people from different ethnic groups, racial groups. I just think it's very important to reflect the variety of people in our state and nation. In terms of these elections, you know, I think that the district judge elections do happen from time to time, but my advice to women who wish to become district judge in the state of Idaho would be basically kind of what everyone here has said. I wouldn't let that deter you from applying. Because you are running on a district-wide level, but not a statewide level. And I just, as a person who has run twice on a statewide level, that is just very daunting. Just the size of the state, the amount of money you have to spend, and frankly, at the Supreme Court level, just the amazing amount of politics that gets into it. I think at the district court level, and I'm not trying to minimize the challenge that that will present, but it's a smaller geographical area. As a district judge, you've probably, you know, you've been in that area, they know you. I was not well known in Mars Ferry or Soda Springs. So, you know, that's much more, it's just a different thing. So if you're thinking that you'd like to be either a magistrate with the retention elections, that to me, that's the type of election I would advocate for, because when you get into a contested election, then you can get all these outside groups getting involved and lots of heated rhetoric. It's not good for the independence of the judiciary to be in those environments. But even if we still have the contested election at the district court level, I would say don't let that distract you from your desire to become a judge. Put in, as Judge Hippler said, you know, put your name in. And, you know, but maybe save up a little bit more money. I don't advocate raiding your children's college fund. We've had 3 kids go through college, and this is expensive. But don't let it discourage you. You can people from the bar will step forward and support you and help your campaign if it so passes that you do have a contested election. And some of the ones that I've observed recently, it almost, not every single one, but if it's not an open seat, it seemed to me that some of the challengers, you know, didn't really put that much effort forth. So I haven't seen a, you know, really pitched effort at the district court level. I have seen it with the open seats. So anyway, don't be discouraged. You know, and having been a judge, it's a great opportunity to serve. It's a great opportunity to learn and just expand your own thinking. So after I left the Supreme Court due to my electoral defeat, I found that there were just many doors open to me. So it's not like it's a death sentence if you're defeated either. So I would love to see more of you. If it's your true heart's passion, you know, don't be deterred, and perhaps put your voice forward as a reformer. It is not in the Constitution that you have to have elections at the time of the now closed party primary. It is not in the Constitution, and it's not in the Constitution that it has to be contested. So there could be legislative reform. Sorry.
I'd like to talk more about the judicial selection process, because that is the number one reason that women gave as a concern for applying for a position on the bench. Specifically, I would like to hear your thoughts on the members of the bar's obligation to complete the surveys when they receive them, and your thoughts on the survey process in general and how it plays into the selection. So, Justice Burdick, since you've served on the Judicial Council, I think you have insight into how the Judicial Council actually uses that information.
It's icing on the cake, usually. Number one, Idaho is one of the few states in the nation that allows this amount of input from the Bar Association, individuals. Some states use Bar Association officers and entity to kind of vet like the ABA does for our United States courts. But this is direct participation. And if the lawyers at the state don't participate in it, they will lose it. Because the usual criticism of it is such a small sample. Well, it's a sample made up of people that are interested in the parties who are involved. I mean, I didn't know Steve when he put in. How could I put anything down? So by the natural game or the natural parameters of the survey, you only talk about the people you know or know of, and I believe that in fact, a very large portion of people do it appropriately. So that would reduce the amount, but as active as possible, it's very important that you participate, because if you don't, the criticism will become so strong that you won't have any input. And that then becomes the thing that none of us want, and that is the good old boy, good old lawyer, good old whatever. You put in your adjective. The surveys that I have seen reiterate what we see on paper. Strong experience at high levels, basic intellect. And that comes out during the interviews. We're very lucky to talk to some very, very fine lawyers. Some of them are obviously not as talented nor as intellectual or as bright or as driven as some of the others. That's just the nature of the beast. But during the interview and the survey, I think they're all very important. Others disagree. We've had this discussion, I'm sure. And but it does allow individuals the chance to express their opinion. Everybody gets lousy comments on their survey. Not everybody can like us. It's that simple. We're lawyers, for Christ's sakes. You think everybody's going to love you? You're in the wrong business, become a nurse or something. So the issue is, you understand you're putting yourself out there. You're going to get the bad remarks. You go forward. Quite frankly, I would have loved to have seen my survey so I could have improved the areas that I did. And in fact, usually the council will talk to you about an area that is in fact comes up on different surveys. For me, it was my temper as a young man. They asked me straight out. They said, many people came back and said, you have a temper. And I said, you bet. I don't suffer fools and I never will. So I don't know if that worked. I got appointed, so I guess it did. But it's just the name of the game. The biggest problem that women had prior to 2010 and the Supreme Court survey is they didn't get in the game. They weren't applying. It was that simple. And then the survey also showed that if in fact you get into the process, there's a higher percentage of the women applicants who weren't going in. Now that information, I don't know why it doesn't resonate. And obviously since 2010, it hasn't even gone up higher. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think, to your latest point, Justice Burdick, do you think that if a woman applies, say, once and goes through the Judicial Council process and maybe doesn't make the list of 4, but is perhaps pretty high up at least, do you think that gives them a better chance if they apply a second and a third time?
Exhibit 1. Exhibit 1. There is a momentum that the cream rises to the top in these interviews, okay? And there is a momentum that carries over time to time. Now, having said that, when I was applying, it was kind of a rule: if you didn't make the short list on the second or third time, you were done. I don't think that applies now. One of the best, if probably in the top 5 in the state magistrates, is Tom Boris. down in Jerome, and Tom put in like 10 times to be a magistrate. Anywhere, even from Soda Springs to Coeur d'Alene, he finally got Jerome and followed me in, and he's doing a hell of a job. But there is a momentum as, and she's job one there. Yes, ma'am.
So, I have a multi-part question. The first one I want to ask you, I took the IWL survey, and I couldn't remember, was there a question about area of practice?
I don't think.
I don't think there
no, I
was.
think
And
in
that-
the Supreme Court survey, there was, but
Right.
not in
And that goes to me, to my, what I see in the results that hasn't been talked about, which is experience. There's a lot of people at the tenure level, like me, I'm in the 10 to 20 year bracket, and I answered that question that I didn't think that I possessed the requisite experience, not because I don't think I could do the job, but I don't think that there's any way in hell I would ever be appointed because I'm a transactional attorney. It also goes to your question about, people answering the surveys.
Survey.
Well, I don't know most of the people that applied because I'm a transactional attorney and my world is very different than a lot of litigators in the state. I also don't have a case maker password. That's horrible, but I don't use the damn thing. And I've luckily had access to Westlaw most of the time. So, I know a lot of transactional attorneys, and I went on it the other day to actually fill it out, and I was like, I don't have a case maker password. I have to figure this out. It's just like one more layer of going to actually submit. And I was actually happy that I knew somebody on there that I could respond to, but I feel like that cuts out a huge swath of the bar. And I do feel like there is a bias against transactional attorneys. Almost everybody I talk to on the bench, there's a few that come out of the bankruptcy or some specialized areas of law that are transactional attorneys and come from that side, but there's a heavy, heavy bias toward litigation. I would be really interested to see how women in practice break down between transactional practice or in-house practice or some other type of role, whether it's a dean of a law school versus litigation, because I would venture to say that more women fall outside of litigation than men. And we self-select. We self-select out of that experience qualification.
See, I guess I go back to what I said before, you don't know until you apply. I would disagree with you that you're not qualified. I don't know you, but as a transaction lawyer, I would disagree with you that you're not qualified. I think to be a judge there, you need to have intellect. You need to have some level of relevant experience. The levels of experience in criminal law, litigation. You need to be able to understand rules of evidence and apply those. But if you can come and show that you are smart, that you are driven, that you have native intelligence, that you are a quick savvy and you're willing to learn. I had never practiced a day of criminal law in my life before becoming a judge. That's most of what I do on any given day. It's not that I'm split, but just in terms of time on the job. So I don't think you should let that make you believe that you're not qualified, make you believe that you can't get appointed. I think that the reason that we don't see more transactional lawyers appointed to the bench is that very issue, that they are self-selecting by not applying.
Do you have, being on as many judicial councils as you've been on, do you hear that discussion?
Oh, sure. Yeah, and the nature of the beast is the judge is involved in litigation. I don't know what the analogy would be, but I'm a lawyer, I'm a judge. I can't go out and be an electrician tomorrow. I'm sorry. So how can I get the experience to show somebody in my first job that I can't be an electrician? Pro bono work, involvement on committees, maybe. Try and get on a criminal rules committee or whatever. I mean, there are just some things that don't work out in your life. Serendipity plays. I tell a lot of people, all you can do is work as hard as you can every day on a couple things: credibility, work product, human relations. You do that every day, and then you develop a reputation, whatever it is. And then you put that on the line in the application process. And then there's serendipity. What are the factors you can't control? One is the job. It's litigation. Two, the pool you're in. I've been very lucky. There were some very weak pools. So the pool you're in is important. The governor. Who knows what they use? I don't. I've never talked to a governor except in the interview. The magistrate commission. If you want to be a magistrate, I didn't do it, obviously, but you interview because I didn't know what the magistrate commission was before I appeared in front of them. So you find out who they are. You mix and mingle with them somehow. That one thing I wanted to say about elections is, number one, if you're afraid of losing your job, you shouldn't be a judge in the first place, number one, because every day you're making decisions that should or could cost you your job. It's that simple. Number two is, if you're running every day as if you're running an election, i.e. your work product, the way you treat people, your outside activities. I never have turned down a speaking engagement. I was president of 2 Rotaries, a hospital board, any number of other things. I ran every day for election. And as such, I've had 1 contested election out of, I think, I just was trying to add them up, I think 10 election chances. So, and I'll probably have somebody next year. So, I guess the issue is that serendipity plays some part, even though we want to be something. No, go ahead.
No, I
don't mean to frustrate you.
understand that. It's just, you know, I think the other thing, if you looked at the slides on the respondents, they said that the reasons that they wanted to be a judge, part of it was public service, part of it was a career goal, but there was, I think the second highest response was the role of a judge as a problem solver. And to me, that isn't something that really breaks down litigation versus transactional practice. I mean, we're still, you know, negotiating.
That is a perfect
solving.
speech for a council or a commissioner. That is a perfect speech. One of the things that when people have come to me and said, you know, what do you do in these things? I say, okay, everybody says I want to be a judge for public service. Snooze. What the heck does public service mean? What does it mean to you? I want to give back. Snooze. Okay, that is what you tell them. A judge is a problem solver. Look what I've done. I was the biggest merger in medical history. I sailed it.
I think just to dovetail that, I'm sorry, well, just one second. I think the 2 things. One is, if you want, I mean, in transactional law, like any other law, if you have a problem, what do? You do the research. So if you want to apply to a magistrate position or a district court judge position or any of them, go watch the interviews, drive somewhere and see what the process is about so that you know your territory. I mean, I know you say you don't do litigation, but I can tell you, as a litigator, you know what you're doing. You know what that courtroom looks like, you know how everything works out. And you know ahead of time because you have done your homework. This is just like that. If you have done that, then you know what the questions are going to be. You know what the climate is going to be, what the environment and the atmosphere, and you know how to play it, just like you're playing a jury. I mean, you are aware, and I'm not saying like, ooh, but I'm just saying, you know, okay, I haven't had a rules, I don't have any experience in the litigation, but I've had the biggest merger imaginable. Well, draw on that, and look at yourself, at least this was the biggest thing for me, don't look at yourself as yourself, because I think, at least for me, I have a problem self-promoting all the time. But generally, that's not a strength that some people have. But if I didn't think of myself as myself, but as a client, and I was advocating for that client, boy, if I took my emotional self out of it and look at the sheet of what have I done? How do I apply that to this? Not me as me, but me as this individual. Then you can figure out how to work that problem and how to promote yourself and how to bridge those gaps of what your experience is and what it isn't. That would be my 2 cents. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is fascinating, and thank you to all the panelists today for. I want to point out some things. I agree with you on the transactional issue. As a transactional lawyer, people ask me, why do you want to apply to be a judge? I go to that questionnaire, and it's like, how many hours do you spend in the courtroom? I said, well, in my life, I've done 2 jury trials, and they were 10 years ago. So I stop right there. I guess I'm not in the mix. So I appreciate you doing that maybe we should all not read so much into that questionnaire. I want to make sure everyone knows that if you're a member of Idaho Women's Lawyers, Peg and Laura Murray have done an amazing job of putting together some resources that IWL can offer you in terms of coaching, get through the interview process. So please, you're not a member of IWL, join it, and that's the resources available to you. I wanted to follow up on something Justice Bergen said, because it really kind of is this core issue where he said something like, women just aren't applying. It's that simple. And I wish it were just that simple, which is why we actually did the survey. Why aren't women applying? That's what we were trying to get part of. And our sample was small, obviously. It was half of my members, 100 or something people. But it was an interesting group because
it was people that were interested.
And, yes, and so what I'd like to hear the panelists follow up on is what I thought was one of the most significant slides was the one that said the number 1 reason why they don't apply is the perceived gender bias. Now we could spend a day trying to figure out what does that even mean, right? Like where does that come from? Is it folklore? What is it? When we had the governor come speak to us like a year ago, the governor said, send me the qualified candidates. That's all I care about. I don't care, male, female, whatever. And I think there's a philosophical issue, which is, I really think it's a problem. The statistics are a problem. I'm not talking about a quota. Let's just get that out there. I'm not saying we need to fix this. Let's just put more bodies in there. But I'm saying as a state, as leaders in the state, is it the problem, and how do we? So I bet WEF has taken on efforts like this to try to get to the bottom of why aren't women applying? Because if the governor is saying send you the women, they'll send you the women. First we have to figure out why we're not applying. But if he's going to look at it and say, it's not my problem that the women aren't applying. So then whose problem is it? And as Justice Silac said, it's better for everyone that represents the state, whether it's gender or whatever. So I feel like it's everybody's problem. IWL is doing its part to try to get women to apply and to get women to feel that they are qualified to apply. And I just want to hear from each of you, whose problem is it? What should the judiciary be doing to be a partner in some way to go around the state and do forums like this, or what do we do to break down the barriers? Because I feel like a lot of the things you said today were really helpful. And are there more things that we can do to get women to apply?
So I guess I misunderstood the slides. When I looked at the slides, it seemed to me that number 1 reason women weren't applying was the same as the men weren't applying when you look at the Supreme Court's survey, which was the selection process, the judicial council process. That was significant. The judicial elections was the second. In the bar survey, or in the Supreme Court survey, 3rd was compensation. That didn't make the top 3 in the viewers. But whose problem is it? It's everybody's problem. It's those that want to be the judge that don't apply. It's your problem. You uphold it, because if you don't apply, you can't be appointed. It's that simple. It's the bar's problem because we have a less diverse bench. It's the state's problem because we have a less diverse bench. That's why I'm here today. It's why I will come anytime, any place, anywhere to talk to whatever forum that I can to encourage qualified applicants to apply, be they men, be they women, be they transgender, be they whatever. We need qualified people on the bench. We need a diverse group on the bench. I'm proud in the 4th district that, at least according to the statistics, we're doing much better than I think most of the other districts are in terms of percentage. I have the great privilege of working with a number of really excellent judges who happen to be females. I just don't think there's anything that should stop you from applying. If this is what you want to do, if you don't have the experience, get the experience. Go to work hard. If you don't have the right kind of experience, figure out how you can sell the experience that you do have. But the number one thing I say is apply. I mean, there was one of my colleagues was appointed to the 4th district bench when there were 3 people that applied to the Judicial Council.
Right, and I think in that instance, they reopened the candidacy again and tried to get more applicants to apply, and they did boost it by maybe 2, but still it was.
The one I think of, there were 3, and it was a short list of 2 from that list.
Okay.
They reopened in Canyon County.
Yeah, we had a reason.
Yeah. So, you know, like you said when I started, you don't have to be the most qualified candidate in the state. You have to be one of the, 3 or 4 most qualified who happen to apply that time. And if you don't get it the first time, don't stop applying. Keep applying. The only time I would suggest to you that you shouldn't, maybe you ought to take a time out for a while, is if I know the Judicial Council tries to submit 4 names when they can, if they have enough candidates. And so if there are enough candidates and they submit 2 or 3 names, that's probably a pretty good indication that they didn't find at this time that you qualified because they didn't submit a full slate. But if you apply and you're not selected in the short list and they sent up a full slate of 4, keep applying, right? In the panel that I was on, there were 14 people that applied when I applied. I was lucky, I got appointed the first time I did. But of the people that applied when I applied, 3 of those other people are now district judges. And so keep trying. Jason Scott, a good friend of mine now, I got to know him as a district judge. He was on, I think, 5 or 6 shortlists before he was finally selected. Keep trying, don't stop.
And that's such a good, it's such a good message. The application process itself, for many of you who have gone through it, it is extremely grueling to fill out that application and to go through your history and put that all down on paper. To only utilize that once seems like a bit of a waste. At the very least, from the personal investment standpoint.
That was the biggest impediment to me, was the application was daunting. And I just never felt like I had the time to spend to fill it out that I needed in the time that it was necessary to get it in. The only reason I think that I got over that hurdle is because I applied for a position that was a newly created legislative position, so I knew it was coming open months in advance, so I had the time to spend it. So even if you're a 5-year-old right now and you're thinking maybe in 10 years I want to apply, get that questionnaire out, fill it out now, and update it as you gain relevant experience. You'll forget that you have when it comes time to fill it out if you don't do that. But don't worry about the bar survey. To be a judge, to be a good lawyer, you have to have thick skin. People are going to say nasty things about you, and that's just the way it is. I think the first question that I got when I was interviewing with the Judicial Council is, why are you such an arrogant ass?
Just put it out there.
I was glad that I got that question because it gave me an opportunity to explain, how, in a litigation standpoint, when you are zealously representing another client's or your client's position to the detriment of somebody else, when they don't win, the other side doesn't win, or they feel like you're beating them, people are not going to look at that and say, oh, well, I just wasn't as good as he was. They're going to look at it and say, well, he was just an arrogant jerk. Yeah, I hope that wasn't because I got the point, I hope that wasn't all of them, but I knew that there would be 1 or 2 that said something not nice about me, but you just have to have thick skin and don't let it discourage you.
Go ahead.
So my perspective on this problem is a little bit different. I've litigated for 20 years in Idaho. I think that as I look around at the last 10 and 15 years, the women that did trial work in private practice like myself were dropping off. And I think it's a retention issue for women lawyers that actually do trial work, because it's very hard if you're a mother, and many of us are mothers. And so I try and scale back with trial work, so I can, and so every time I think about a judge job, when people ask me about it, I think, how can I be a good mom and a good judge? Because the job does not seem to be very flexible. Whereas in private practice, I have flexibility, and I can, try and do both at the same time. And I look at a district judge job as being inflexible, if you will, and many of us are mothers, and that is a big concern. And so I don't put my name in for primarily that reason. And I look around with female litigators with my level of experience, and there aren't that many, really. And so those of you that are transactional working, I'm not trying to say that it's harder. It's not harder. It's just harder to be flexible if you do litigation, because you have court deadlines and you have to appear in court, and your kid's sick, it just doesn't matter. You have to be there, and that makes it very hard to do both. And I mean, I'll just come out and say it. Most women often are more of the primary caretaker of the children than are the men. And I'm not trying to defend any men in the room, because I'm not saying that's always the case, but I think a lot of the time it's the case. And so to do this job and to do trial work and get that kind of experience and to be a mother is very hard. And then you look at the judge job and think, oh my gosh, where would my flexibility go?
Which is why so many women
Yeah, there's a lot of women transactional and government jobs, and so it is a struggle to maintain a private practice and do trial work consistently and be a mom.
Well, I think Judge Sullivan's probably a good person to speak to this issue, so let's listen to what she has to say.
Yeah, I have twins, so I get that, yeah. In private practice, I would be able to change some things around if the kids were sick, or if, I don't know, swim lessons, tennis lessons, whatever, I was able to carve that notch. And obviously, I'm not able to do that. The hours are not flexible, they're fixed. But just like with anything else, you make adjustments and you can still maintain I'm done with court today. I'm going to go celebrate my kid's birthday with them and take them out to dinner. I mean, you can still do a balance. It's just being able to find what works for you and frankly what works for your family. And I'm also very lucky to have parents and that are snowbirds, so they're here half the time to do some of those things with the kids. For me to be able to rely on that, and I've had a wonderful caregiver that was able to help with the children. If someone was sick, she was able to go get to them. So I was able to have that. It takes a village, but it's helpful to have that, and I'm not blind to the fact that I'm fortunate to have that to fall back on.
Well, I think that's key. I think you're right. To be in full-time work, you have to have some sort of empathy. But I've heard stories, for example, where a magistrate, she was drop off kids and then come to work. I was getting there maybe at 9 and not 8, and was reported to the judicial, to somebody else. And so I hear stories like that, and I think, because it shouldn't be. Many law firms now and jobs have been accommodating to women, and that's what we have to have women in retention. And then when more women are retained in the job, more women are going to be available to the judges when they have that kind of experience. We're not dropping off like we have been for so many years. Law firms are very flexible now with women, and there's also a way to keep women in the law and retain them. I don't know if the judge position, the perception is that that's not the case. I don't know if that's true or not, but from what I hear, it's not true. So in other words, you can work 40 plus hours a week in a good law firm and have that flexibility. You don't have to work from 8 to 5. But from what I hear, that's not the case if you're a judge.
That's exactly right. That's a wonderful insight, number one. As a district judge in Twin Falls, number one, the biggest mistake I made in my life was I put too much work into being a judge to the exclusion of my sons. I paid for it, and we're trying to rebuild bridges, etc. So yes, you're correct. It is inflexible. You serve the public, and if you're there every day, the hours you should be, and working as hard as you should be, You don't have that flexibility. As a district judge in Twin Falls, and I know a hell of a lot of district judges throughout the state, especially in the 4th District, Sundays, you work at least one day on the weekend. I worked almost every Sunday that I was a district judge in Twin Falls. I'm sorry, my church going suffer.
Susie, did you have a question?
You know, it was kind of one of the women in the back had a comment, but you know, one encouraging thing I think is that the governor of the last 5 cabinet appointments he had on his his cabinet were women. And when I spoke with some of them, just when I see them out in gatherings, 4 of them didn't know the governor. They really had no affiliation with the governor other than they'd been recommended by someone and they thrown their name in the hat. And the recent borough commissioner, Sandy Jones, she really had no affiliation to the governor at all. And, or didn't know anybody that knew the governor, but she put her name in and she got the job. So I think that's really encouraging. For a lot of you, I know it's a different, branch of government, but for you who are interested in being a judge, just hearing what they're saying, if you can get over not applying, and you just apply, then even if you don't know the governor, you might get picked. I think this is really kind of exciting.
So, go ahead, Laura. Question. I know that I think some of the panelists maybe have to go around the 9 o'clock now. But some of the information that we looked at said that in conjunction with these issues were in some of the states that a strategic recruitment was helpful even from the Judicial Council itself. So I'm wondering if that might be something to look at. I don't know that the Judicial Council actively seeks candidates, but maybe that's something that could be considered, to be proactive on this and having, and I think, and as several of you said, people like to be asked. You need to apply, you ought to be a judge. That really helps people apply. And so if we can strategically look at encouraging people to apply, I think that's helpful. And maybe even from the Judicial Council level on down, might be something to look at. The other thing that we've seen is the application process. The more transparent it can be, the better. And so, I've looked at that application and it's involved. And I'm wondering if maybe some kind of outreach to people when there are positions out there, not only to say you should apply, but maybe in a workshop on let's sit down with you and let's look at the application and let's tell you what we're looking for here, or something where it's more transparent and easier for people to apply. Just a couple of ideas that
Speaking on behalf of the Judicial Council, they took a step backward and I disagreed with them. When they told judges that you shouldn't go out and do exactly what got us involved, and that is to go out and get the people that are doing the best job and tell them, hey, apply, give it a shot, you're doing a hell of a job. I just disagreed with that. The council voted for it. When we get a new executive director, I'm going to work very hard to get that overturned because I think you should be encouraged if you're doing a fine job and become a judge in that regard. Who better to understand your personality, your intellect, your work ethic. At some point in time, hand-holding gets too much. The Judicial Council, even in discussion with applicants and sending their names to the governor, if one of us goes out and helps you with your application, how does that look? I mean, we get enough criticism as it is. I mean, at some point in time, you got to cowgirl up and do your application, do the best job you can. You folks are always at the interviews. You know what sells, you know what doesn't. Get involved with this group. You just got to do it. In response to the 2010, the Supreme Court has a road show that goes on. They have workshops. I think enough's enough. Other than that, another question.
I was just going to say that before, I know recently in Canyon County, and I know in the other districts, the Supreme Court does put on a recruitment seminar and they bring the judges. And then I would also suggest if you are interested, like Judge Wilkin said,
go watch the interviews because it's a very interesting process, and I watch a lot of it, and there's not a lot of people there. And I think you gain a lot of insight as to what the Judicial Council is looking for and the concerns that they have, and you know, some of those. And I think it's also telling to watch some of those highly qualified candidates sell themselves into draw on things that they've done in their lives. They might not fit that role exactly, but they sell themselves in a way that I've done this, and that makes me qualified to do X, Y, and Z on the bench. I think it's a very interesting process to watch those interviews.
Absolutely, it gets rid of the boogeyman. It really does happen with this. I mean, you've seen, you're like, all right, I can do that. I can see how this works, you know. And I would also say, if you're thinking of applying, don't wait for a position to become available. I mean, you can get the applications online ahead of time, so you can start filling, because it is, I think, 18 pages now. But more than that, I mean, you can start thinking about, how would I answer this question? What makes me perfect for this position? You might not have which position exactly, but you're thinking about it, and you are working on that process of being able to sell yourself to that position very straightforward and direct manner. I think that's what's important. And so yeah, between going to the interviews and watching them, same thing with magistrate applications, you can pull them down. And not only just the application, but read the rest of the paperwork. I'm on the 3rd Judicial District and then the Supreme Court website. What are the characteristics of the judge? Because yeah, experience is one of them, but that's only one of them. There are, I believe, 5 or 6 different qualifications listed out. So look at those and think about those, and think about how you apply to those characteristics, and how you can shine above those other applicants, and how you can rise to the top and be one of those 4 names, or be on the short list for interviews for magistrate. I think that it's not just something, oh, I just opened up, well, I don't know what do I do. If this is a goal that you have, just like going to law school is a goal, take the steps, do the research, and get involved, so that you are ready to push the button when serendipity calls.
Well, our time is up. Thanks everyone for coming in. Thank you very much to our panelists. We really appreciate your insights today.